Hi, everybody. My name is Jessica Lugo. I am an organizer for the group March to the Polls. March to the Polls is a nonpartisan organization that works in the DFW Metroplex. Nonpartisan means that they don't affiliate with one political party or the other. Our focus is simply to get young people registered to vote and get them out to the polling locations when the time comes. So today we're going to focus really on how important it is for young people to get out and vote. Your vote is your power. I don't know if you know this, but you have the power to impact this election, to decide the election in 2020 for people your age. And so we're going to focus on that today. Some of our topics today are going to be why should you vote? Why your vote matters? What issues are most important to you as a young person? How to get registered and how to vote when the time comes. And then I'm also going to give you some additional resources so that you can look into and find out more information to make sure you're prepared to vote when it's time to do so. Before we get started, please find the My Vote, My Voice, My Power Google form that your teacher should have uploaded for you somewhere on your learning platform. While we are going through this presentation, there are questions for you to answer on that Google form. So make sure that you're following along, make sure you're answering those questions as we go. You should be able to minimize this presentation so that you can see both it and the Google form on your screen. It may take a little finagling, you may have to resize your screens just a little bit, but you should be able to see both on your computer. If you're struggling to see the Google form, you can't get it up on your computer, then just go ahead and pull that up on your phone and you'll be able to answer those questions on your phone while you're watching the presentation. The first thing we're going to look at today is a video that was put together by people your age talking about how powerful your vote is. While you're watching this video, I want you to consider whether or not you agree with these young people. Do you think that your vote matters? And tell me why you think that. This is the first question on that Google form that I was telling you about a minute ago. So watch this video and try to answer that question as you follow along.
This is a message to my future self.
This is a call out to the world.
I am part of the most diverse generation ever.
And if you're 18 to 24 years old, this includes you too.
Gen Z, the now generation.
Whatever people want to call us.
We're the group that everyone knows can make a huge difference in how things get done.
But only if we decide to get out and vote.
In 2020, there were over 27 million of us eligible to vote across the U.S.
27 million.
2 million of us are right here in Texas.
Our interests are different.
Our views of the future,
Our views of the environment,
of our safety and education,
of how we treat each other are different.
We have the power to decide our future.
We can decide who gets to be on our city council.
We can help decide how we treat the environment.
How our schools get funded.
And if resources like financial aid are available to help us go to school.
We decide gun safety, what our minimum wage should be.
We can help decide on whether men and women get paid equally.
And whether there's gender equality for all.
And what our healthcare options should be. We can help decide on our access to voting rights.
And whether we build a sustainable future.
Who we want to help us, who help the common people get what they deserve and what they need.
But only if we vote.
But only if we vote.
But only if we vote.
But only if we get out and vote.
If we don't vote, we're essentially giving other people the power to decide for us.
Our votes are power.
community power,
Family power.
People power.
Even though we cast our votes as individuals,
Our votes
amplify others.
It amplifies yours.
Hers.
His.
Ours.
Because it's not just about me.
The more people that vote in my community,
The more power that we have to actually make the changes we want to see.
So I won't let anyone tell me voting doesn't matter.
Or that I can't do anything about what's going on.
I can.
we can.
Because politicians listen to the people that vote.
History proves this.
We're the most diverse generation ever.
Let's reflect that.
Let's help decide our future.
Let's make our voices heard.
Let's vote.
Let's exercise our power.
Real power.
My vote is my right. Our right.
My vote is my voice. Our voice. My vote is my power. Our power.
Okay, so consider that. Take a minute to answer that question. Does your vote matter? If you don't agree with them, tell me why. If you do agree with them, tell me why. If you need to pause to take a minute to write that answer down in your Google form, please go ahead and pause this presentation and do so. One of the things that was mentioned in the video was that politicians listen to people who vote. So let's think about issues that are important to you in your life. What things are significant to you? If you could vote today, what issues would you focus on when determining which candidate you'd support or which issue you'd support? Try to come up with 3 or 4. And again, feel free to pause here if you need a minute to do that before the video continues. But think about things closest to you. You are about to embark on a new educational journey. Does the cost of education, is that important to you? Are school lunches important to you? Think of a few things and jot those down. Now take a look at the graph that you see here on the chart. This graph is from the US Census Bureau, and it shows turnout by age across the United States. So we're looking at age groups that got out and voted in the last 30 years or so. Take a minute to look at the graph and answer the questions. Again, these are on your Google form. What major trends do you notice here? First of all, let's make sure that you know what you're looking at. The blue line that you see here is the 18 to 29-year-old age group and their voter turnout across these election years that you see. Then you've got the the red are 30 to 44-year-olds. The green is 45 to 59-year-olds, and the purple is 60 and older. So take a look at that. What major trends do you notice? And then based on this graph, who do you think the elected officials are paying attention to and why? Feel free to pause here and answer that question in your Google form. One thing that I hope that you noticed is that 18 to 29-year-olds are turning out in far fewer numbers than everyone else in the United States, and significantly fewer numbers than the oldest people in our population. Another thing that you may have noticed is that these are zigzaggy lines. So every 2 years or so, these voter turnout numbers change. Remember, we elect the president every 4 years. So we're coming up on a presidential election year in 2020. The last one was in 2016. So more people tend to turn out in presidential election years. However, there are midterm elections that occur every 2 years. And so you've got, in 2014, there was a midterm election before the 2016 presidential election. People tend to turn out in much fewer numbers in those midterm elections. And then politicians are paying attention to the people who vote. So they are paying attention to the needs of 60-plus-year-olds who are going out and voting. 70% of that population is going out and voting consistently every presidential election year, which means that elected officials are less likely to pay attention to what young people have to say because they turn out in far fewer numbers. Consider your grandparents. Do they have the same issues, the same needs, the same desires as you do as a young person? Probably not. They're probably not concerned about going to college and how much it will cost them and whether financial aid will be available. They're probably not concerned about school lunches, for example. So their issues are being addressed, but yours are not. As young people, you have to understand that you are world changers. You have the ability to change your society, to change the nation, to implement a lot of major policy changes in the world. Historically, people your age have been responsible for those major social and political changes in the United States and all over the world. People in your age group organized sit-ins and marches as part of the civil rights movement to make sure that minorities had equal rights. They also engaged in protests and marches to end the Vietnam War, and that was organized again by young people. Can you think of any movements young people have participated in recently that have participated in or organized? Take a minute to think about some of those things. Ultimately, many of these movements have been started by young people. Imagine how much you could do if this action was represented at the voting booths on election day. If young people turned out in huge numbers to vote on election day, consider who politicians would listen to then. Consider how your needs would be taken care of and addressed by people that you elect. That's an important thing to know. 2020 is a really important election year. This year, Texas voters will choose the president, a US senator, 36 US representatives, countless state senators and representatives, and then lots of judges and other local officials like city council and school board. A lot of these local races are responsible for issues most relevant to your everyday life. They determine whether to put a stop sign in at the end of your street, or they determine when school will start and whether school will start during a pandemic, and those kinds of things that impact your everyday life are also on the ballot this year. So now that you understand how important it is to vote, we need to talk about how to register. So go through, answer these questions on your worksheet on the Google form as we go. So in order to be eligible to register to vote, you have to be a US citizen, you have to be 17 years and 10 months old, you must not be declared mentally incapacitated by a judge, and if you've been convicted of a felony, it has to have been discharged by the court. So notice it says to register, you have to be 17 years and 10 months old. You have to be 18 to actually vote, but you can register 2 months before your 18th birthday. If you're convicted of a felony, it has to be discharged, which means that you have served your time and have completed all the requirements, and therefore you no longer have that issue to deal with. Once that felony has been discharged, you are eligible to vote again. So if you meet these requirements, let's get you registered to vote. Use the QR code here, take your phone and hold the camera up to that QR code and pull that up on your phone. We're going to walk through how to register. If you're on the computer, you can click on the link that you see there and go to marchtothepolls.org, and we will walk through the registration process. If you're not registered to vote, follow along with us so you know what to do. I'm sorry, if you're not eligible to register to vote yet, follow along with us so you know what to do when the time comes. Once you get to the March to the Polls website, find the section that says register and then select new, and let's walk through this application. First thing you need to do is check that you are a United States citizen and are at least 17 years and 10 months old, and then you're going to select the new application card type. Once you've done that, this will pull up. So go ahead and start entering your personal information. When you enter your name, make sure you are entering your legal name here. Can't be any nicknames. Legal name, date of birth, year first, then month, then date, and then it asks for your contact information. Make sure that you include that contact information. If for some reason there's an issue with your registration application, then someone can contact you to get clarification or to let you know that you need to resubmit an application, for example. Then enter your residence address. This is where you live. This is your primary residence. Enter that address here. If you don't have an address, you're staying with friends or something like that, just use the address where you have been staying. I'm going to move on, but go ahead and feel free to pause here if you need more time to fill in this information. Next, fill in your mailing address. If mail can't go to your residence address, then, for example, if you have a P.O. box or something like that, that's what needs to go here for your mailing address. You only have to complete this section if you don't receive mail at your home. If you do receive mail at your home, you can skip this part of the application. Next, there's a place for you to provide identification information. If you have a Texas driver's license, a state ID, or a social security number, then you'll check that first option. If you don't have a driver's license, a state ID, or a social security number, check the box that says, I don't have one of those things. That doesn't mean you have to stop there. If you do have a Texas driver's license or any of the applicable IDs, you will enter that information where it asks for your Texas driver's license or the last 4 digits of your social security number. If you don't have those things, then you'll still be able to move to the next page, and we'll talk about what to do in the event that you can't get an ID before it's time to vote. If you do have one of these forms of identification, but you don't have it with you, stop here and write down our website, which is listed on the screen. You'll have to complete this application when you have the appropriate information. Go home and ask your mom or your parent for the last 4 digits of your social security number, or grab your driver's license, and then you can go back to this website and fill in this information. Then finally, at the end of the application, there's a place for you to check a box that says, tell me when elections are happening. This is a good way to stay in the loop. So March to the Polls will send you a notification when it's time for you to get registered, when it's time for you to actually vote. Once you've checked that box, then please also check the box that says, I've read and accept the privacy policy, and then submit your voter information. So yay, that's exciting. You've submitted your application, but this is not the last step in this process. In order for your application to be accepted, you have to physically sign it. You haven't signed it by filling out the application online. So within a few weeks, March to the Polls will send you your completed application by mail. They'll also send you a postage paid envelope addressed to your local elections office. So when you receive this in the mail, please open it. You must sign and date it with a blue or black pen and then mail it back in. You will only be registered if you complete this final step. So you will get an envelope addressed to your local elections office. All you have to do is open this application, sign and date it in blue or black pen, and then put it in that postage paid envelope to be sent to your elections office. If you don't receive this application within 10 business days, email info@marchtothepolls.org so they can look into the status of your application and get that out to you as quickly as possible. Your application has to be received by the elections office by October 5th of this year. That means you will have had to sign and date it and send it back in a couple of weeks before that. So return your signed application as soon as possible so you get registered to vote in time for this election. Once you've submitted your application, you've signed and dated it and put it in the mail, you'll receive a voter registration certificate that looks like what you see on your screen within 30 days. Your certificate will have your name, address, and what districts you live in and can vote in. And you see that there. You can also check this information on your county elections website. If you live in Tarrant County, just Google Tarrant County Elections Office and it'll come up. If you're worried about your registration certificate, you can pull that information up online through the county's elections office. So now you're almost registered to vote. March to the Polls has this really cool challenge where we are encouraging you to get 2 or 3 eligible family members or friends to also register to vote through our website. If you can do that, take a picture of them walking through the registration process and use the hashtag MTTP challenge so that we can see the difference that you're making. Post those photos on social media. Let us see you getting your friends and family registered to vote too. All right, once you get your voter registration certificate, when it's time to vote, here's what you need to know. In Dallas, Collin, Tarrant counties, most all of the surrounding counties in the Metroplex, you can vote at any polling location in the county on election day, which is November 3rd this year. You can also do that during early voting, which begins this year on October 13th. A week earlier than it normally does. So you have even more time to get out and vote. You can check your county elections office again for early voting dates and times and locations. You can find the closest location to you and vote there. When you arrive at your polling location, you have to have some form of identification. So a driver's license or a state ID, your US passport, a military ID, And though it's not required, it's a good idea to have your voter registration card, that yellow form that you just saw in the last slide. If you can't obtain any of these forms of ID, you do have the option to complete a reasonable impediment declaration. So I told you before you could check that box that said you didn't have an ID. That's where this comes in. If you couldn't obtain one of those forms of ID, ask for a reasonable impediment declaration at the polls. It may take a minute for them to get that because it's not a common question that's asked. But once you get it, complete the form. You also will have to provide an alternate form of ID, a voter registration certificate, a certified copy of your birth certificate, a bank statement with your name on it, a paycheck with your name on it. You can still vote if you fill out this form and have one of those alternate forms of identification. If you have any issues voting at your polling location, there is a number that you can call. If they can't give you a reasonable impediment declaration form, or they're telling you you can't vote for some reason, you have the right to vote. So call this number and find out what you can do in the event that you're struggling to vote at your polling location. If you have any questions, we'd love to hear from you. You can find out more about March to the Polls and actually get involved in our organization by using one of the two websites or QR codes on the left side of your screen. If you're in Tarrant County, use that QR code you see there on the far left side. In Dallas and other counties, use that, that middle QR code on the left side. One of the last questions on your Google form is to include who represents you. So use the QR code that you see in the middle on the right side, or the website that you see there. Go to that website, enter your address, and you can find out who represents you. Write those people's names in your Google form. And then when it gets a little closer to the election, find out what's on your ballot using that QR code on the far right side. It's vote411.org. It's, again, a nonpartisan website where you can find out who is voting, or who you're voting for, what issues are on the ballot. And it's a great resource to compare candidates and see who you align with more, what issues they're addressing that are important to you. So congratulations, you are on your way to being an informed first-time voter. This is so exciting. You are going to make a difference for your generation. I can't stress that enough. You are going to make the difference. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us at March to the Polls, and we appreciate all that you do. Thanks.